Government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
We can meet our destiny to build a land here that will be for all mankind a shining city on a hill.
You're listening to the Liberty Brothers Radio Show, only on Revolution Radio. Now, here are your hosts, Jim White and Jason Van Tatenhove.
The crusade for freedom is your chance and mine to fight communism.
You hang up and try again.
All right, and welcome once again to the Liberty Brothers Radio Show. I am Jason Van Tatenhove, your guest, your host, as always, along with my brother in Liberty, Jim White. How you doing, Jim?
I'm doing good today, man. Doing real good. Just want to apologize first off. From yesterday, I actually signed on to the network. My Skype went out. My computer was having problems. I think there was something wrong with it, and I had to replatform my whole machine overnight. So sorry about that yesterday. Jason, I know you were illin'. That wasn't a good day for radio yesterday for the Liberty Brothers.
It happens. It happens. So we have a pretty big show today. We have Elana Freeland, who is the author of Chemtrails, HAARP, and the Full Spectrum Dominance of Planet Earth. We have Billy Hayes, who is one of the original HAARP engineers, the guys who originally did so much in the creation of HAARP. And then we have Clifford Carnicom, who is probably the top researcher in the field of chemtrails and Morgellons disease, and just so much of the information that we have, the good scientific data that we have gotten over the years has come from Clifford, and that is just it's just an honor to have these people coming on to have a roundtable here about chemtrails, geoengineering, all of the above, Morgellons disease, you name it. So yeah, definitely pretty cool. So let's go ahead and just jump into this and start getting people on the air here, and yeah, see what we can't figure out. So
I'm on right now. I'm on Clifford Carnicom's website, which is carnicominstitute.org.
Yep,
I believe is his main website. So everybody out there, just if you have a chance, go check that out. I'm sure he'd appreciate it. And of course, check us out on the LibertyBrothers.com. Because of my computer malfunctioning, I didn't get a chance to take care of that Rob Dew article, but I'm going to have that here in the next day or so, and maybe have it now since it's already Friday, maybe release it Sunday morning or something.
Oh, absolutely. Sounds good. Let's see here. Let's go ahead and bring on Elana first, and we'll get everyone on and then do introductions and go from there. So here we go.
All right.
Hello, Elana.
Hey, hi, Jason.
How you doing? Thanks for coming on the show. You're live on the air on the Liberty Brothers Radio Show. Give us just a minute. We're going to try to get everybody else on here.
Okay.
We'll try to get Clifford on next, and then Billy, and hopefully we can... Oh, Clifford needs to add me. I don't know if you can send Clifford a... I sent him a friend request, but he needs to add me in order to become
all right.
here on the show. Otherwise, maybe you can add him. You might be able to add him as well.
Add him to you?
You should be able to add to call. If you just click on his contact, and there should be a little button there that says add to call.
Okay.
Possibly.
Yeah, I don't see it in my version. Let me just call him.
Okay.
And then you want to go ahead and get Billy?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and get Billy.
Oh.
Sounds good.
Okay. Clifford.
That's why we love live radio.
There's always something. It's just always phone roulette.
Yeah, exactly.
Hi, Elana. Thanks for joining us. This is Jim. Thanks so much for having us, for being on the show today.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm struggling to figure this out. Clifford. Let me just email him.
So, in other news today, yeah, one of those things. Yeah, I was on. I was actually on Billy Redneck's show this morning, Jason, talking about you and some of the things, some of the articles that you had brought up, especially about the A-10 warthogs going on there with the police, and it was a good show. Got a chance to. He went. Is Billy there?
Hello.
Hey, Billy.
Hey, Billy.
Are we on the air?
We are on the air. Welcome to the
And
Liberty
I'm trying
Brothers
to
Radio
get
Show.
Clifford, Billy.
I didn't know.
And what is it? What does Clifford have to do? Accept you as a what?
Hold on. There
Why,
we go.
Billy? Are you going to get him?
Yep, I'm trying to bring him in.
Okay.
All right.
Cool.
Thanks, Billy.
Oh, I better hang up with him first. I was talking to him.
Oh, yeah, that helps. Got to bring him into the right call.
So I thought I could just say a word here to get your listeners started before Clifford comes on. Some people have, because I run a Facebook site for my book, I have heard from people, gee whiz, we just don't hear from Clifford enough, and what's he doing, and is he still doing research, and what's going on? And, Clifford was one of the pioneers of all the research into this area of chemtrails and HARP technology. And people often, newcomers, they don't know that. They don't know that he's been on I don't know how many radio shows. And now he's deep into the research and, of course, needing money, which we're going to give a pitch for today for a piece of equipment that he desperately needs.
Sure.
Just to let people know that he hasn't been ignoring people, it's mostly that it's so intensive to do this kind of DNA research.
Absolutely. We could also, if it's easier, I can add them via phone as well.
Yeah, no, I think we were on the Skype this morning. I know it works.
Okay, looks like I'm in.
Oh, there we are.
Hey.
Hi, Clifford. How are you doing? Thanks for joining
Hi,
us
sir.
on the Liberty Brothers Radio Show. Let's go ahead and give some introductions here real quick. Since we brought you on, Elana, we'll do ladies first. Elana is the author of Chemtrails, HARP, and the Full Spectrum Dominance of Planet Earth. She's been on the show before. Elana Freeland came to political age during the COINTELPRO decade of Vietnam, street riots, and political assassinations, and the all-night rap sessions about the downfalls of the establishment. Researching Sub Rosa America included discovering how deeply her U.S. Navy father was enmeshed in the very military-industrial complex she was writing about. And like the characters in the book, learning how every major event and personality in the United States political establishment over the past 40 years is tied in one way or another to the assassination of JFK in Dallas. She has a BA in creative writing and wrote her master's thesis on historiography. Besides ghostwriting books on a variety of subjects, she's just finished a book on chemtrails and HARP for Farrell House Press, and that's already been released. And that's actually, I would say, the best book out there, at least the ones that I've come across, on chemtrails, geoengineering, the whole 9 yards. And then we also have Clifford joining us, Clifford Carnicom. And you are I got to tell you, you really have been the driving force behind the research that has been put out there as far as geoengineering, chemtrails, and connections to Morgellons disease. And you have the Carnicom Institute, which is a 501c3, which was started in November 13th of 2008 and became a domestic nonprofit corporation chartered in the state of New Mexico. And really, tell us a little bit about what brought you. I mean, you've got such a rich scientific background. I'm not even sure where to start there. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you to this research you're doing now?
Yes, hi, Jason, and thanks very much for the invitation to be here today. I appreciate it very much. I think first and foremost, I regard myself as a citizen. Human beings are not something that have a caste system where we're exalted one upon the other. I'm a member of the human race. I have my place and my role in it, as we all do. And so I act basically as a citizen. I'm an independent researcher. I have no ties. And yes, I have a formal background on the educational side and the work side. But in terms of what calls me here in my life, it is based upon my rights and responsibilities as a citizen, and basically to serve both moral and ethical causes that are in need.
Awesome. Well, we're so glad you're doing the work you are, because there's so few people doing it, and doing it in such a professional way as you are. We also have on the line Billy Hayes. Billy is a friend of the show. He's been on more times than I can count. And he is known as the HARP guy. He's one of the original engineers on the HARP project, and his body of knowledge is very deep. I hardly need an introduction on this show, Billy, because you're just on so often. But tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this sort of work as well. Working with the HARP, and then just learning more about what's happening with the geoengineering and these next generation items we're seeing with NextRad and Space Fence.
Well, the best thing I can say is I was one of the government experiments. I didn't know it until the last couple of decades, what I was into. I was one of the people who constructed the HARP sites all over the world, 250 different sites all over the world. And I grew up on Eglin Air Force Base, and I didn't realize at that time that we were part of an experiment there with, MK Ultra was one of the things I got involved in when I was 11 years old. I was put into a home for boys. We called them reform school back then. I was a troublesome little guy. I loved to run away from home. My father was in the military. I lived under a military structure that at that time I didn't apply to, and they took care of me. And I got into things that normal people don't get into as a young child. I was trained. I was sent away. I spent a lot of time at Langley. I don't remember some of my past. I was involved with the testings at Eglin Air Force Base of Agent Orange, which is now all my classmates, 50% of my classmates now have structure problems with their bodies due to Agent Orange and Morgellons.
Okay. Well, let's start off here. I got to admit that I really did not, until I got into this radio show, and I always knew there was something going on in the skies, but really didn't start really paying attention until maybe a year or two ago, and started to really watch the skies and notice these grid patterns that were being put down, and notice how the weather would change not soon afterwards. And it just seems the more you get into it, there's so many obvious signs that there's something going on in our skies, and I'll be the first to admit I don't know exactly what that is. I've got my theories on it, but it sure seems that there is weather patterns we've never seen before, and we cannot deny the amounts of aluminum and barium we're seeing falling out of the skies. Let's maybe just start off with for those of our listeners who may not be as well up on others, what is geoengineering? What are the chemtrails? And kind of let's start off with like a 101 discussion real quick, and then we go deeper down the rabbit hole.
I was wondering if Clifford could start, because Clifford and I became friends when we were both living in Santa Fe. He and his wife and I and another friend would have breakfast. And at that time, I had done some research on chemtrails and on HARP, but I don't think I understood how intertwined they were. And when I say HARP, I'm not just talking about the installation up in Gakona, Alaska. HARP is a technology, and as Billy said, who built 250 installations around the world, it's a global technology for geoengineering and a variety of agendas that have to do with geoengineering. But Clifford began working on the chemtrails and observing and measurements back in the early to mid-90s. Clifford, do you want to just start out with what you were doing back then?
Well, again, I was called. Thank you, Elana. I was called upon basically a breach of human rights. I mean, that's what motivated me. It was clear to me that something was wrong. Spent quite a bit of my life in the natural world as well, and we all share certain resources. The right and welfare of a healthy life is something we're all entitled to, and when that's infringed upon, as I observed early 1999 is when my work started. I had a job, I had a calling to do. It's not something I ever planned or intended to do, but that's my calling. If something that I know is wrong is occurring, then it's my job to call attention to it. So that process started. It started at an elementary level of simply no more than or different than a journalist of just taking photographs, just saying, hey, folks, something's happening. And certainly there's been a long evolution. I'm into this about 15 years now. And as the work evolved, it became increasingly complex. And, when Jason is asking about geoengineering and what it is, the picture is so broad. And if we go to seek a definition of geoengineering, because I'm actually working on another project on a moratorium effort, and if you just try to find a definition of that, the definitions that are out there by themselves are woefully inadequate. There is some kind of inference or an assumption that we're dealing primarily with a climate modification issue, and that's essentially it. That's not the case at all, I don't believe. I believe we're dealing with numerous agendas, as Elana is referring to, or projects, whatever you'd like to call them. And in addition, I cannot make any separation whatsoever between the term of, or at least the association of geoengineering as well as bioengineering. Bioengineering is not a term that has reached popular distribution yet at the same level, but in my work and in my mind, we must think basically, ultimately, of those forces and factors that seek to essentially apply control, have and apply control to all earth and life processes. And you really can't get any bigger than that, is what it amounts to.
This is Jim. Thanks so much for all of you joining us today. There's been some reports coming out that they want to start, believe it or not, administering vaccines through the air, and I would assume by the same delivery system that they currently deliver the chemtrails. Is that something from your research, although they speak about wanting to do it, is that sort of a red herring, or is that something that you think is feasible to actually administer vaccines through the air?
Well, I think it's beyond feasible in terms of the information evidence indicates that we are subject, that the citizens on this planet are being subjected. Motive and source, not exactly necessarily defined as well, but as a point in fact, the citizens of this planet are being subjected to biological operations and or substances or materials that are being applied without their consent or knowledge. And, can I make the distinction of whether it's claimed to be a, quote, vaccination or not? I can't at this point because I'm dealing at the biological level, basically, and increasingly at the biochemical level. But in terms of conceptual understanding, there is ample evidence to indicate that we are living in a biologically altered environment as well as a geophysically altered environment.
So, Clifford, what exactly does that mean? I mean, break that down when you say we're living in a biologically altered environment. Explain that one.
Well, that jumps to the biological aspect of my work, which it actually came into the picture very early. If people actually look at the work, you will find biological references literally in the year 2000. I started in 1999. I know by the year 2000, again by the process of investigation. What is investigation? We observe. We look. We're willing to look at something regardless of what it is. We don't have an agenda about what it is we think something is. We just look. And so I began the process of studying samples. And those samples were often sent to me as my work started to become known. And if you look at that early work, you will see under the microscope essentially the appearance of biological components and structures that they simply had no known reference point at that time to me. You will find a seeking, a calling of anyone that has an answer to what the nature of these biological agents is. You will find communication and correspondence with the Environmental Protection Agency to seek out the identification of these materials. In all cases, you will find a complete and abject failure of all parties to respond to that request coming not just from me, but essentially, eventually, from citizens across the entire country and globe. So that was the first point of disclosure, is that there's something wrong here. Okay, you have an environmental side that you can take on, and you have a biological side that you can take on. But the biological side said, hey, these structures don't make any sense. What are they? And it has fallen upon me, in part, along with others. I'm not going to claim entire jurisdiction over this by any means. But as a citizen, I do what I can to make that information known. I now have roughly 300 I suppose it's up to about 325 papers that have been written over 15 years with about probably 1,500 pages of material that chronicle and document that evolution of knowledge and my efforts to make that information available to the public to answer the questions that you're asking now.
And those documents are at carnicominstitute.org. For people who want to go there. But one of the things I want to insert here is I'm basically a historian. That's what my master's degree is in. And I document things. And so I'm trained to document things as well as possible. And that's, of course, what the over 600 footnotes in the book Chemtrails, HAARP, and the Full Spectrum Dominance of Planet Earth are all about. But I completely commiserate with Clifford that many people now, having been trained in over 50 years of cognitive dissonance at the hand of the mainstream media, television, film, sound bites, talk shows that where everybody gets just a few seconds to put their point of view, this has really ruined the American ability to concentrate, the American ability to break down ideas, to not be intimidated by scientific papers where the scientist, namely Clifford Carnicom, has bent over backwards to make it accessible to people what he is discovering because our very lives depend on it. I find again and again that people want me to spoon feed them tiny factoids as if you can build an entire picture from fragments when you haven't even done the precursor work of really looking into what this person has produced for you to read. Do you hear my frustration?
Indeed, indeed. You know, we had a guest on the show here, and this question would be for any of the three of you, or all three of you. We had a guest on the show by the name of Deborah Tavares, who's done a lot of real good work, different than what you guys are doing, but a lot of good work nonetheless. And she talks about smart dust, about them spraying smart dust and some of the stuff that they put in these chemtrails. And she describes smart dust basically as something that attaches to your lungs and really actually changes a person's physiology. Is that something that any of you have heard of before, that term smart dust? And is that accurate from what you know?
I would say it's more than I've heard of it. I'm trying to find it as we speak, but whether or not I'll come up with it or not, I don't know. But there's a briefing. In fact, I met Deborah recently, and I had seen the briefing, and she had given it to me also. But this terminology is already deeply entrenched, even within briefings. And I don't know exactly how that briefing became available. It's a NASA briefing, and it's specifically mentioned essentially this type of technology. And it's not a secret at this point. If you can think of something being done, ultimately what it comes down to me, if you can imagine a human being, mind, wanting to do something to either affect or control the environment in some way, and to apply all the technology that has been learned in the course of human progress, and we are in the nano world, that's a new frontier, that it will be done, and it is being done if at all possible. And, if I can dig up a briefing, you will find basic an outline of saying this is exactly what's happening. This is not some, conceptual project. These things are in place.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Morgellons disease. If you go and look up Morgellons disease on Wikipedia, it basically tells you that it's a made-up disease, and we know this isn't true. I know people personally that have suffered from it. But there's so much going on with it. I mean, we've seen samples where, people are pushing out material that's got printed serial numbers on it. We're seeing nanodyes being pushed out of people, all kinds of things. It seems like we're already, as you've said, we've already been bioengineered, and that's a very scary prospect for me, to think that we already have technology in place in our bodies that we didn't agree upon and has just happened. Can you give us a brief introduction as to Morgellons disease and what's really going on there? It seems like it's the people's immune system is pushing out this technology that has made its way into our body, whether that's through chemtrails or processed foods or however. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Clifford, do you want to start? Or I want Billy to come in at some point and talk, because Billy is a Morgellons sufferer.
Yeah, Billy, why don't we start with you?
Okay, well, I'm one of the most dominant of the Morgellons sufferers. In fact, that mine was introduced to me in the 60s at Eglin Air Force Base with the experiments that were going on there with Agent Orange and other chemicals. We were oversprayed by chemicals that they were testing at Eglin by accident, they say. They were trying to spray Agent Orange and accidentally dumped it on Eglin Capehart housing on the base, and all dependents in that area are now sufferers of Morgellons. With me, it was expedited by the fact that I have RF burns, and the Morgellons has backstayed into the scar tissue and the cyst and the tumors within my body from the RF burns. So I have crops of Morgellons. Unlike normal people, everybody has Morgellons, by the way. Everybody. It's the fact that some Morgellons is active and some is non-active. And it's for people like Clifford to get down and dig into this information, because nothing's coming out about it. They keep on hiding it. They won't talk about it. Clifford's about the only one that has stood up and took to trial the expertise needed to find the basic cause, the basic wimps of this terrible, terrible little bug. It's kind of a half a real life organism and half silicon, it seems like. At the same time, some Morgellons, like mine, has a crystalline gem in it, like a ruby crystal. In fact, it's a synthetic ruby crystal in some of the active Morgellons.
If I can, just I wanted to go back for just a second very briefly, because I wanted to give you this reference just so people know I'm not just vague about what I'm saying. When I was talking about the briefing that I was mentioning a minute ago, your title of that is called The Future of Now. This is from Dennis Bushnell, Chief Scientist, NASA Langley Research Center. This is a NASA document. And I'm not going to go into it in depth, but just to give you the title of this, the title of this is basically, it has the title Borgs, robotics into it. I'm sorry, Future Strategic Issues, Future Warfare 2025. Right, here it is. Here's the subtitle of this document. The bots, this would be in quotes, the bots, Borgs, and humans welcome you to 2025 AD, okay? That'll give you an idea of the subject matter of this briefing, which is 114 pages. In terms of the question of Morgellons, in terms of what's the general nature of it, my response would be that it is perceived by the public that Morgellons is basically an unusual and isolated skin condition, essentially confined to the skin of a human being, that affects a reasonably small group of people. And that, of course, the characterization is that the folks that speak of this are crazy. That's the public perception that has been given. By the way, just as a side note, maybe you'll find different, but I do think my research is fairly substantial at this point. If you were to take a classic search engine by the name of Google and you would put in the subject Morgellons, with the body of work that I've made available, you will not find that information up front, and in contrast, you will find some rather incidental sources of information that will be on the front of your list that encourage and propagate that perception of being a limited skin condition. As Billy is saying, my evidence would indicate exactly quite to the contrary, that we are dealing with a situation that affects the population in general. At this point, it looks to be highly statistically significant, and that it is simply incorrect and wrong to perceive it as a, quote, skin condition. My work would indicate that you're dealing with a systemic presence, literally, on the planet. And in fact, I've written a paper called The New Biology, and the point of that paper is that what we're speaking of is, again, affecting the planet, and it is a false perception to try and restrict this as being involving a few folks, and they happen to have something psychological that's driving the whole thing. So it's a false perception. The actual scenario is much more in line with what Billy is describing.
And real quick, if people want to see the document that Clifford's talking about, it's actually online. If you go to stopthecrime.net, it is there right at the top. If you look at NASA Future of Warfare document, there's a link to it right there. We'll put it in the chat room, but that is stopthecrime.net, and you can see the document in its entirety. Download it for yourself.
As far as the delivery system for this Morgellons creature, which Clifford and I were talking earlier, the term Morgellons is really very insufficient. It's not even accurate. It's taken from an 18th century document. The name that Clifford has given it is the cross-domain bacteria, and he can explain that better than I. But the delivery system is the fibers coming, at least one of the delivery systems. And GMOs are probably, in my mind, definitely involved. If not delivering the actual fibers, certainly providing the kind of environment that the fibers can thrive in. Chemtrails, they have polymers, are dropping down, and many of these polymers are piggybacked by these biologicals, these so-called experimental biologicals that we then inhale, ingest, and then they take up residence in us because they are primarily interested in eating the iron from our erythrocytes, from our red blood cells, which, as you know, are the carriers of our oxygen.
Now,
something.
Go ahead, Jim. Sorry.
Something unusual. But you just talked about GMO, and when you think of that, you think of Monsanto. Something's in the air because we had talked about on the show here. They've just purchased, and Jason, you can probably confirm this. They just purchased the old Blackwater private security firm. Monsanto has purchased them.
That was that is now Academy. Yes, it has now been purchased.
Right, and I find it curious that a biotech company like that would need their own private army. Do you think it's because some of these things are coming out here in the open, and they feel that there may be some sort of a backlash because they can't keep this hidden forever, can they?
Well, as far as the backlash being the cause of having a security force, I mean, Chiquita Bananas has a security force as well. So does Exxon, et cetera. So no, I don't find that unusual. And certainly Blackwater has been around the block many times in renaming itself and its all the scandals around it. I see it as all these guys are in cahoots, right? They're all corporate boys. They're what I call the backroom boys. And they work together and they scratch each other's backs. And certainly they are deeply involved with this so-called geoengineering move that's going on. Is Monsanto worried? Well, if Monsanto's worried that if it is at all replaced, it will be replaced by some other giant like DuPont or something. So I don't get too excited by those headlines.
Let me ask you this, guys. We've established that there's definitely something going on in our bodies. We've seen the microscopic data, with the things seeming to eat those iron
out of the blood. We've seen it in blood cells falling out of the skies that have been made resilient, that they can last out in the environment. My question would be, what is the end game there with this? What is their purpose of putting this into everybody in the world? Is it a nanotechnology to be able to shut us off, to turn us into a Manchurian candidate, to cure us of all disease, which I don't think is probably the case? What are your thoughts? And I know we don't have any definitive answers here, but could you speculate as to why would... I mean, this seems like something out of a bad science fiction movie, and I wish it was, but this is happening right now. What do you think that end game might be?
Clifford, can you speculate a little bit?
Well, actually, I was going to defer to you. I'll definitely have my place there, but those that know me know that I'm not as prone to speculation, maybe as might be desired, because I don't have an inside track. But in terms of getting the answer to that question, what I would be after, and what I am after, is you need to get to the source. How can you get the answer to that question unless you have an answer to the source of what it is you're speaking about? Now, I know my path. I know what I need to do. Whether or not I'll get there, I don't know. But I would say right now that there would be two sort of scenarios that would seem to be more likely, at least, to consider as source material, okay, in terms of the biology, the unusual biology, particularly that I'm seeing and involved in. The first would be that would be human created, okay? The whole field of bioengineering, genetic engineering is just busting wide open. I mean, we can't, it's like having the atom bomb in its own way. We're kids playing with toys. And it's a wide open field in terms of what's going on there. And again, we'll do anything we can get our hands on. So it is possible, it is feasible. There is nothing that I have seen at this point in my work. I'm aware of others that will claim other things, but my work shows nothing at this point that is beyond the extent of human knowledge and or human capability with respect to biological modification and or development. Okay, it falls within that sphere, because human beings are pretty clever creatures, and they'll pretty much, again, do whatever they can get their hands on. There is an alternate source, and I don't push exotic speculation. It's not my style, but you will see it in my papers. If you'll find a paper called CDB Characteristics, cross-domain bacteria characteristics, that paper is unfinished because basically it became a very serious, heavy paper as I was going along, and for several reasons I needed to take a break. I'll be going back to that paper, but if you read that paper where it's ending, it's basically saying the characteristics of the type of life form that I'm looking at are shared highly with those organisms that live number one, in Earth. If they're found on Earth, they are in the most extreme environments that you can imagine, what they'll call the archaea, things that are considered completely inhospitable in terms of heat, chemistry, this type of thing. That's where you'll find them on Earth. In that same line of investigation, you will find those same people that are investigating that type of life seriously looking for that type of life on other planets, okay? And what I'm saying is, to get to the source, you first have to be honest and find out the answer to the question is, are you dealing with something that originates from this planet? Is it human-induced? Or are there things that are essentially beyond the human experience that we now as a species and members of the planet will face? That's the way I go about a question like that, because I don't have an inside track. Sure, I can say there are potential agendas of control. Listen, if you keep everybody sick, they're paying money, right? The leading cause of bankruptcy in this country is that of health issues, right? So there's a zillion agendas that you can have. But how do we really get that answer without getting to the source and the nature of the biology that we're speaking of? And that would be my quest.
Clifford, am I hearing you say, if you don't mind, am I hearing you say that you think some of these may be not of this earth, or in the common vernacular, alien, perhaps, in the sense of being from another planet or other world type stuff? Is that what you're getting at, perhaps?
Or just the ability to survive in those environments, I'm thinking, Jim.
I see. Okay, very good. My
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No.
Clifford, go ahead, Cliff.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is that if we are honest in the world of science, we investigate and we put all the options on the table. It doesn't mean that we have to draw conclusions, or that we put words in our mouth, or that we take it as some, determined conclusion. But you can bet that there are very serious investigations, a great deal of effort going on in the world of exobiology, basically. Okay, but listen, I mean, it's happening as we speak. I mean, what do you think? What do you think is happening on Mars on the headline paper? Those things which are disclosed. There will come a time when human beings will openly face the prospect of life outside their sphere on this planet, and we're long overdue for that. And it doesn't mean that I'm pushing or saying any particular agenda. I'm just saying if we want to be honest and fair with ourselves, the types of life forms that I'm talking about, I'm saying that if you study them, you will see they will share characteristics with the same type of investigations that are taking place for life on other planets in places that were considered 10 years ago to be completely impossible in terms of their I'll get that word wrong, hospitality, I guess, whatever. But, I'm speaking of a methane ocean on, a moon of Jupiter. What 10 years ago would have been thought as impossible to consider is now a very serious contender for alternative forms of life. So I don't want to be viewed as speculation. I'm saying this is the world of reality, and human beings will face this eventually, and we may be needing to face it more in our face than we understand.
Well, we may even be facing it sooner than later. I mean, we've had a couple guests on the last month talking about these titanium spheres that are coming from outside our atmosphere and seem to have this biological ooze out of them, but crashing into these high-level balloons. And, these are very prestigious universities that are doing this research, and they're not denying that. This is coming from somewhere outside of our own ecosphere. So I think you're absolutely right on that one. But let's talk.
Can you then see the value experimentally to turn human beings, organic life forms, into petri dishes for these exotic creatures and see what happens? You can see the value of that to some scientists, yes?
Sounds like it's something out of X-Files, Elana.
Well,
it really
for
does.
me, I'm now several years into this, and I've graduated from that way of looking to realizing that we're already there, and that all the science fiction that we've been fed over the decades, much of it, as you have already discerned, has in a way attempted to prepare us for the future. And it's just that we have to now realize, we're in the future, and now we need to look at it in a bit of a different way. And that's, of course, what I and many others are trying to do, is trying to catch up people's minds to value the bigger picture, that we are on the edge of a very different time. Very different.
I think you are absolutely right, Elana. I think there's technology well beyond what we know about, and we're just scratching the surface. We're just seeing the tip of the iceberg, but we are being gotten ready for it psychologically through media, and so through everything that we're going through right now. Let's ask about this real quick. What I know that I've been following this, and I've gotten very emotional about it, and I know that's not necessarily the best way to approach something like this, because it does make me angry to think that my children, my 9-year-old daughter, my 6-year-old daughter, my wife, who already is sick with Crohn's disease, is breathing in these things. It's in the food, it's in the water. We just can't seem to get away from it. And if it's being distributed via aircraft way up in the atmosphere, well, what can I do about it? Well, I've started to actually just get larger lenses for my cameras and start video documenting and photo documenting, the types of planes that are spraying this stuff, to try to figure out, all right, well, if that's all I can see, then how can I get more information from that? But there's got to be a whole lot of infrastructure around such a huge global project. And it seems to me there's got to be ways we can put some of these pieces together. What would you suggest, all of you, I'm putting this question out to all of us, that people can do on their own to try to get a piece of that puzzle that might be able to fit into some of the pieces you guys have already put together? At times I feel very helpless trying to figure out what I can do about this, and feel like I can't do anything. But we are seeing progression. We're seeing now we have a project, whether it's real or not. We've got the Indigo Skyfold project that has been named. We've got some pilots, supposed pilots, I can't really verify it, that have supposedly come forward with their stories, but people are talking about it more. What can people do
to start getting some of these pieces of the puzzle for themselves? What would your suggestions be, guys?
Well, let me step in here. Our first thing we have to do is submit the question of what is it, not who is doing it. We actually have to get down and find out what is happening and what really it is, because until we understand fully what these things are, there's no sense going out finding out who's doing it. We have to know what it is, and this is what we put on the table for Clifford. Is he's one of the few that is out there trying to answer that question. What is this stuff? How does it associate with chemtrails? Does it associate with chemtrails? Only thing we have so far is data that says certain people who have been in certain situations are reacting to have reactants with this Morgellons and chemtrails. And it's for people like Clifford, who is sitting down and really trying to show what this is before we go out finding who is doing it and then why they're doing it. Go ahead.
Clifford,
Mm-hmm.
you want to handle that question a bit?
Well, the basic W's, right? Who, what, when, where, why, and all this kind of stuff. And yes, obviously that is my focus. We know insinuations of these W's to some extent, but to me, what Billy is saying is a very logical place, and it's obviously where I've invested a great deal of my time and effort, right? In terms of what you can do, I'm not the political or activist speaker, but and my answer may not be adequate, but essentially everyone has a role, right? I happen to be a researcher. It happens to be, my sort of path in life that I've chosen to apply myself to. I've been involved with various things in my life, but in this capacity, I have the hat of an independent researcher for 15 years. I apply all of my background, all of my life. The truth is, I've probably been working in one way or another, 12 to 15 hours a day. I started a nonprofit for that sake of asking the same question, or giving a vehicle, providing a vehicle. It's a very small nonprofit. That nonprofit should have, 200 people working for it, and it should have a budget that can handle environmental and biochemical operations at an adequate level. Well, that's not the case. But every single person has a part and has a role. And I start by asking the question, what are you good at? I mean, if I was good at speaking, I would be out speaking all the time. If I was good at writing, I would be writing, okay? Every single person, I think, if they wish to, that's a decision every one of you can make. But from my side, there's no excuse. If you actually care about the issue, if you believe that, the air that you breathe is the same air that I breathe, and you and I have to work it out, how we share it together, and you accept that responsibility, then I would ask you, what are your strengths? And I think you have the obligation and the duty to exercise those strengths. Elana is a writer, right? Billy is an engineer. You're a radio host. That responsibility, from my point of view, extends to everyone on this planet that feels they have a common stake of existence on this planet.
I can't deny that. Go for it, Jim.
Yeah, we had a guest on. Thanks, Jason. We had a guest on, a reputable guy here last month, and he was talking about, although he wasn't an apologist for the chem, he believes that there are spraying. There's no doubt. He also says that the Earth's magnetic shield is depleting as well. It's already depleted. I want to say about 15%. What he had said was one possible use for the chemtrails is to put that aluminum salts and silver and all the other things in the atmosphere to help create and help reinforce our weakening shield that's protecting the Earth. Do you buy?
That was Ben Davidson of Suspicious Observers.
Correct.
Yes.
Do you think that's possible?
Billy could answer that. Billy? Billy?
We lose you, Billy?
I'm sorry. I know. I'm trying to find the button. You all have to bear with me. I'm laying in bed.
Oh, you're fine. We're just going to put another hash mark on the talking into the mute button list. We all have our list going.
I mean, I was talking away and didn't realize I wasn't talking. What was the question again? I lost it.
So we were asked, Jim had asked, Jim, I'll let you rephrase it, but basically what Ben Davidson was saying about the possible spraying of the aluminum, silvers, barium to protect the atmosphere.
Okay. First thing, when we're dealing with talking about chemtrails, everybody has to understand this is not just one tool. This is a multi-burst implement. It is used as a tooling for so many things. When they started it, it was one thing. It's just like HARP. HARP started out to be an experimental issue of tomography. It graduated into other experiments until it just crescendoed into this domino effect of collecting information that every college in the world wanted a piece of the HARP technology. Now this HARP technology has damaged the ionosphere to the point that they cannot use the power that they had before. They turned around and used Ben.
Ben's last. Yeah, suspicious observers.
Yeah.
Ben Davidson.
Bernard.
Oh, Bernard Eastland. Eastland.
Right. Used some of his theories in adopting the ideal of utilizing nanoparticulates in the atmosphere to raise the frequency of activity that HARP was doing, to make it closer in and more directive by laying a atmospheric reflector that would do the same that the ionosphere was doing. Otherwise, a band-aid of the ionosphere that the HARP had already damaged. And now we're in that process of now they're chemming us so heavily that it's not just our atmosphere that they're trying to put this Band-Aid on. Now with every launch of every rocket that's put into space, there is a plume that follows with these of everything that's in the chemtrails. Only up to 80 tons of the same material, all in one shot.
Including aluminum oxide, yeah.
Aluminum oxide and barium oxides.
Hey guys, go ahead,
Go ahead, Jason. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say we're coming right up to the first hour break. Wanted you guys to give out your websites real quick, and then we'd love you to carry over to hour two. We really want to hear about this new piece of equipment you're talking about, and go where the conversation takes us. This is great. We love it. Thanks for joining us, guys. Please give out your websites. We'll start off with you, Cliff, and then Elana, and then Billy.
CarnicomInstitute.org, my last name, Carnicom, and then the word institute, all lowercase, no spaces, nonprofit.org on the end, CarnicomInstitute.org.
All right, and tell you what, we'll save the others for when we come right back. Folks, stick with us. In hour two of the Liberty Brothers Radio Show, we'll be right back.
Are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates.
You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
All right, and welcome back to the Liberty Brothers Radio Show. We're coming to you live out of the great state of Montana. As always, I want to I want to appeal to our audience. If you love what you get here at Revolution Radio is the largest listener-supported radio station on the internet, period, hands down, just is. And it takes some doing to do that. So Nighthawk, the owner, has done a lot of work to keep us off the Google infrastructure because we were getting a lot of hacks, and we know that they can shut down YouTube, or Google will just shut you down at the drop of a dime, and he's really made it difficult for them to do that, and that takes some doing, and we rely on you, the listeners, to do that. You get everything here from Agenda 21, chemtrails, Morgellons disease, like you get here on our show, but you also get paranormal stuff, you name it. The whole gamut is here on Revolution Radio. If you love what you get, I really strongly suggest you vote with your dollar, and it doesn't take much. Go to freedomslips.com, click on that donate button, and do your part. Also want to give a shout out to the Red State Talk Radio Network that also carries our show. We love the listeners there. Please do your part to support Red State Talk Radio. Make sure if you're hearing them on a terrestrial station, I know we just picked up a whole bunch of new terrestrial stations in North Carolina. I want to welcome those listeners as well. Please let those sponsors know that are advertising on that network. Hey, I heard about you on this show, on Revolution Radio, and on Red State Talk Radio, on the Liberty Brothers. Also want to encourage everybody to go out to thelibertybrothers.com. Also want to give a shout out to WDFP, the Stand Up America Network, to our listeners there as well. So thanks so much for listening to the show and joining us every day. We have got a great show today. We have Elana Freeland, Billy Hayes, and Clifford Carnicom. Just a powerhouse of information here when it comes to chemtrails, geoengineering, Morgellons disease, how it all ties together with HARP and Space Fence and all these other projects, the Indigo Skyfold project. So, yeah, just incredible information here, folks. So let's get right back to it. Before the break, we were giving out some websites. Elana, why don't you give us out real quick where people can get more information on your book, where they can purchase it. I own your book. I went out and bought it, and it is just an incredible resource for those that whether you're new to the whole geoengineering chemtrail thing, or if you've been studying it for a while. There's just so much great information there. Tell us our listeners where they can get it and get more information.
Well, as far as the book, Chemtrails, HARP, and the Full Spectrum Dominance of Planet Earth, people can get that either through Amazon, or they can go to their local bookstore, and the bookstore will order it from their distributor, because there are over 100 distributors. It has recently been translated into German, and so if you have friends in Germany who need it, now they can read it. So I have a Facebook page, which people can become a member of if they go to my personal one, Elana Freeland. They can ask to be a member of my private closed group page, which is Elana Freeland, Chemtrails, HARP, and the Full Spectrum. At that page, people are able to put up things that they find. If I find that members I've hand selected by going to their Facebook page looking for an environmental consciousness that is already there, if I find that there's inappropriate language or any lack of respect or too little of a knowledge base, I will definitely unfriend that person because I'm interested only now in preparing a group. I have over, I think, 700 members now, to be able to field questions in the public, because it is the public mind that I'm most interested in awakening and feeding. So well, that's it.
I know I'm friends with you on Facebook. I don't know if I'm part of the group, though. I'm going to have to put in an application there.
Yes, please do.
All right. Billy, you've got a Facebook page, but do you have any websites, anything like that you'd like to give out? Oh,
well,
Billy.
his Facebook page is great.
Yeah, and I think you can just get that from billyhayes.com. He may have actually dropped off. He wasn't feeling so well. Either that or he's still talking in the mute button, but probably dropped off at this point. So if he comes back in, we'll ask him at that point.
I'm back.
Oh, there you are.
I'm using a wireless mouse and a keyboard and wireless mic and everything, so, and a pair of binoculars to see the monitors from the bed. So
well, we appreciate the effort.
I do have a Billy's Update blogspot.com, and my Facebook is Billy Hayes 67548.
All right. And
on to Clifford.
Well, Clifford, I think we got your information. We'll do that again right before the end of the show. So there's some connections here with the GMOs. And obviously we know that there's more and more studies coming out that GMOs are just bad for you in general. I know I try to avoid them as much as I can, but it just seems so impossible. Within the organic stuff at Whole Foods, it's supposedly certified organic, it still has GMOs in it. Can you guys talk about the connection with the what we're talking here with the geoengineering and the Morgellons and everything else, and how that ties into the GMOs?
Okay, I can only speculate on it, so I'll let Elana go.
Is Clifford, are you there?
I sure am.
What would you say I see it in two ways. One, that the GMOs, because Monsanto came out with the aluminum-resistant seed before the chemtrail onslaught happened in the late 90s, I feel that the GMO seed, known as Terminator seed, by the way, to people who don't know, that it actually was perhaps genetically tailored to this cross-domain bacteria that is being delivered in part by chemtrails. The other option that I consider is that the GMO foods, which have been banned now in most nations of the world, at least half of them, is actually provides the environment, the acidic environment that these cross-domain bacteria would thrive in. What do you think?
Well, on my side, I see an overlap of issues here, and I'm focused on a particular biology that I wish to get to the heart of. So I can't speak for all GMO issues, but two of the issues you'd be dealing with here is the issue of deliberate modification or alteration of a species of life, right? And this would be the basis of the GMO crusade for humans to intervene in the process of biology, and not only that, do it from a commercial standpoint and under purported claims of being of benefit to the planet. That should be one way. In terms of my work on the Morgellons issue, which again, I don't really think that term is all adequate. I actually believe the proper framework in which to think of this is a species of life that up to this point is not properly identified, or let's say not formally identified, which calls into question, its existence calls into question whether or not it has an engineered nature. I mean, you have several alternatives. One could be simply have a new species that exists on this planet, and it's our job to find out its nature. Another possibility would be that you have a deliberate modification of a species. There would be nothing unusual or surprising about that, since bacteria are really the primary. It's the way in which bioengineering, genetic engineering was discovered, was through bacterial modification. It's the easiest vehicle to work with. So this would be a second source, and a third source would be, as I mentioned before, alternative source, whether it's exterior to life as we know it on this planet. The way that I have become involved in this issue is again going to the question of the source. If you're after the source, and what Billy was talking about what is it? What is the nature of it? Okay. Well, if you associate this with a health condition, then people can often want to draw conclusions or make conclusions. And one of your conclusions could be that this is some kind of infectious, or this is some kind of contagious disease. And again, it's restricted to a smaller group of people. How I have become more deeply involved in this, and I have to suggest the tie-ins with the GMO, is that my work at this point indicates that this has an environmental source, not something that's confined to humans, not something that is in a small group, but an environmental existence on essentially a planetary basis. That's what that paper called The New Biology is making the point. It's bigger than we say, folks. It's bigger than we acknowledge. Now, the other problem that I have run into is because of the extent of which this appears to exist, the environment includes the food. And as a part of my work, you will see some initial investigations. One of them happened almost in an incidental fashion, probably close to 10 years ago. The other happened last year, where I sort of revisited the issue. And the food supply is fair game to examine here. There's no reason whatsoever we should be thinking just in terms of a human being. That's not what the evidence indicates. So when I had time to start to visit the question of food, I find the existence of this life form within what I would call a random sampling of the food supply. Now, again, I'm not going to make a final conclusion, but I'm going to say as a researcher, this is what I find. That it is a serious question as to the extent and nature of this organism and or biology on this planet. And the food supply is a part of that. Even more disappointing to many individuals will be the examination of so-called organic products. and foodstuffs within that study that at this point shows no exemption whatsoever. And I think it could be a very much a false illusion to think somehow you have a separation between so-called organic food products and even conventional products. So the crossover between the introductory means by which genetic engineering was introduced, the unusual characteristics of the biology that seriously suggests the possibilities of genetic engineering, and the food supply are all important cross connections to be made.
Well, it seems like we can't even get away from it. I mean, I try to filter my water here, and I live in southwestern Montana. I hunt a lot of my own food. I fish a lot of my own food, whether that's elk or deer. But I can't deny that if this is being sprayed and getting into the water supplies and getting onto the food supplies of these sources of food for me and my family, well, it's still getting there. Even if it's some of the most supposed to be some of the cleanest food out there, it just seems we can't get away from it at all. Is there any way for us to safeguard ourselves from what's happening here?
Can I introduce something?
Please. Absolutely.
When we're talking about these particulates, we're talking about nanoparticulates, which are far smaller than anything that can be taken out by normal filtering. What we consider filtering could billions of these things will pass through that filtering systems. Air systems, same thing. Water systems, they're all passive of these nano-sized particulates. Go ahead.
Yeah, Clifford, how has it looked since we talked last regarding the alkalinity as being something that the cross-domain bacteria do not thrive in?
I have spent actually a fair amount of time over the last couple of years presenting information that says if we do know something about the nature of this, which I say we do, I think we do know some things about the nature, at least on the biology side that I'm working with. Along with that knowledge, what's the reason for getting the knowledge? It's not just to sit on it and to know about it; it's to be able to act upon it. And what's a primary motive that I have here? It's to provide the information so that we have the understanding of how we can either adjust, adapt, or heal our planet. So in terms of what Elana is speaking of, this is one of the things that came out very early in the work. That certainly it's really beyond the point of maybe. This particular organism definitely prefers a highly acidic environment. So when you have that information, yes, you can use it. And you don't necessarily just take baking soda and everything's fine. You have to go deeper than that. But nevertheless, having that information certainly can be valuable. Now, there's another sort of approach and strategy in this, because see, this is a very common human reaction we have, that if something seems overwhelming to us, we become despondent in many ways, and we say there's nothing, I don't know what to do. And I understand that, but it's not the attitude or strategy that I take. I think there's a tremendous wealth of information available to us. Another fact of life is that biology is changing all the time. Again, I don't have an agenda here, okay? I'm not going to throw in a conspiratorial bent just by virtue of the issue. Biology is a dynamic process on this planet and within the cosmos. It is not unusual to have hundreds or whatever, up to thousands of species of various life forms and pathogens and bacteria in our bodies. Rather than thinking that we must, rid the cosmos of something that is evil, that's not the way it works. Okay, in elementary school, biology was telling me the cockroaches are going to survive the atomic bomb. I mean, we don't have control of that process at that level. So there's with increased understanding and knowledge of our planet and our environment, we are then in a better position to understand how we can basically deal with that change. The nature of human beings is one of adaptation. Intelligence was once defined to me. It's not too bad of a definition. I don't know it's complete, but intelligence was defined as the ability to adapt. It's an interesting definition because this is what can distinguish and does distinguish human beings in many ways. It is not all a hopeless venture here in my book at all, and that's the very reason I do my work. So I don't think the attitude of thinking that I have to escape from something is our best strategy. I think we get the answers to what we have, as Billy has said, and then we act on it. We act on it in a coordinated, intelligent sense that's deserving of our species.
Gotcha.
I totally agree. And I want to add that fear itself, anxiety itself, is acid producing. For me, I really feel that this is just another creature alive in my biological body. And so I have to find a way to not just accommodate its existence, which, by the way, even though I don't have lesions, I now and again can feel it moving under my skin. I feel one of them because they are very much a collective. But can I, even though I eat organic for various reasons, and you're right that it is not safe, particularly in the sense if I'm thinking that the cross-domain bacteria is not in it, I do seek an alkaline acid balance. And I have spoken of this many times on radio shows, that just to look at, I talked to a gentleman the other day who called from Nebraska, who said that he has pH paper that he pees on every morning to see how his pH factor is, and then he adjusts himself accordingly. And it's an experiment. It's like our bodies now are little laboratories, and we are all chemists. We are all PhDs of our body, and that is. It's an adventure. It's an adventure that the time we live in has placed upon our shoulders. And I'm with Clifford. I find it very exciting because we don't know what will happen if we really participate in this challenge, not fear it, not seek to hide from it, but to participate in the challenge. We still don't know what will happen, and that's very exciting to me.
Very interesting. Very interesting point of view on that. Go ahead, Jim.
Well, I'm looking at, we certainly as humans can adapt to things, but what concerns me, and it certainly, I'm not saying I'm fearful. It certainly concerns me. You see stuff in the air, you see in the water, the food, the vaccines. How much longer can we I know we can adapt as a human species, but they're hitting us on every level. Are we going to start seeing a point where we're going to start seeing, I know cancer has increased, kidney failure and dialysis clinics are popping up all over. Something's going on here. Autism is increasing. Are they going to kill us before they get done with their experiments is, I guess, my question.
The survival of life on this planet is not a guaranteed thing. It's not assured, it's adaptation alone is not adequate. The viability of life on this planet, as far as I'm concerned, is in serious jeopardy. Okay, I'm not an alarmist, but you pay your dues. If you crap in your bed, and sorry to use strong word there, but if you crap in your bed, you're going to pay the price for it. And we are paying that price, and we will continue to pay that price, and whether or not it results in the extinction of the species. And we've already wiped out, and I don't know if you want to attribute it all to human beings, but you can bet we have our part. 8 years ago, I was citing a paper that said 40% of the marine life was extinct. You just had the article out in the last 3 months or so, extending it to the land base. I mean, the numbers are huge. They're serious, okay? You're dealing with 40 to 50% extinction levels in recorded history. These are extreme numbers, so I don't want to try to paint a rosy picture here either that, we adapt to whatever it is. That's not the case. But Elana's comment, I think, about participation is right on. How do you even begin to address the problem unless you're willing to take a stake and be involved and make your mark? I think that's where the responsibility aspect is being brought up, and I believe should be forced upon us. We have to deal with that question. We cannot just deal with the alarmist issues, with the fear issues. If we damage our planet, we are responsible. Okay, we are responsible to heal it. And if we don't, will pay the price.
Absolutely. I think a part of that is education, though. We've got to really, because a lot of people are just they're so entrenched with the all the programming, all the TV. They're just not aware and awake. So I think part of it is just waking people up to it.
And I think when I was listening to, I think it was Jim who was talking and doing that bit of a list of, well, this can happen and this can happen. I mean, that is so easy to do, isn't it? Just to sit and think of all the things that are, and what I've learned is that's the sign of, to me, the beginner. I've been in this now for several years, and so I'm not a beginner anymore. As far as shouldering the burden of what I know, I, in fact, have been quite amazed to see how much stronger I'm growing. And I have to say that it's not because I'm being supported by a vast community of people. In my town, nobody wants to talk to me. Nobody wants to hear about this. No one reads the Chemtrails Heart Book. So I am not able to call upon those around me, but I am calling upon something very deep within myself. And I have developed a much stronger relationship in that what I call the inner life. And I'm not entirely in agreement with Clifford that we may be facing an extinction here as far as humanity, but I do feel that there is something that you can draw upon from within if you are committed to participating in the challenge of your age. And by God, this is it. This is not just another issue. This is the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the food we eat. This is it. So I'm excited that I'm able to be in this with such admirable people. Yes, there's the occasional troll. But haven't you, as radio hosts, haven't you just met amazing people, not being paid, not having a prestigious career because everyone admires them from the mainstream, but people clinging to the edge and saying and doing remarkable things. Oh. This is quite a brotherhood and sisterhood that we have.
Absolutely. I can tell you it's providence, the journey that I've been on, and I think Jim has as well. There's the amazing people we have met just by getting involved in doing something, becoming active, finding our part, and doing what we can. And we encourage everyone, often we spent 20 minutes yesterday on our last show encouraging people to find their part as far as what to be doing as far as the Liberty Truth movement. So I have to absolutely agree. Let's take a second here. Now, Cliff, you're working on some new stuff and you're trying to get some new equipment. Can we talk about the research you're working on currently and what you're hoping to be able to get to further that research?
Sure. Thank you, Jason. My work is at the stage right now. It's been a very slow process, but my work is at the stage now where the primary components, meaning biological molecules, the major subdivisions of a life form, they have been isolated. This basically means proteins, lipids or fats, and DNA has also been isolated, and that's all in the records there. Now, that is an achievement, and unfortunately it's been a very painful achievement and very long term to get to that point. And it's not a falsehood to state if the proper means and equipment were available, that what has taken 15 years in that journey to accomplish certainly could have been done within a matter of months. That's not an exaggeration if the proper means and resources were available. But nevertheless, this is a journey that has been taken. And so it is an important stage of achievement to have biology at that level because it opens up the path towards answering the questions as Billy was saying, what is it? At least more accurately. And to do this, to go on, basically, I'm at a threshold in terms of what I can do. If people actually understood the level of resources that have been available to get to this point. Well, to give you an example, the documentary I made, I believe it's probably the lowest budget documentary ever made. That was on the film side, but that took 1.5 years, and the budget for that documentary was $400. That's in line with basically the way operations have had to take place here. I'm at the point now where I am at a threshold, and I will not be able to continue or to push the work to the point where it needs to be to make what I would still call very basic progress, to tell you the truth, in terms of where we need to get to eventually. But very basic information about the chemical, the molecular sort of nature and structure of these separated biological molecules. And one of the basic pieces of equipment, if you were to go to any laboratory, one of the most basic pieces of equipment is what's called an infrared spectrometer. And the nutshell is that a modern instrument of about the lowest entry you can get into will cost about 14 grand. That's our entire budget for a year is what it amounts to. And we need that instrument. I have what's called an environmental filament project that's been in the wings now for several years. I have a standing list of samples that are going to be worked on. That work will start in 2.5 months. We're not going to get where we need to go in any kind of reasonable sense unless we modernize this particular piece of equipment. I have a 30-year-old piece of equipment from eBay that took me 3 months to get working, that I have to hold a piece of paper on and tape it on, and started out putting a rubber band on it to get the pen to hold. Spent 3 months getting that instrument to work. I have produced some information which is of value, but 30 years behind the times means that you have none of the advantages of computer technology, and that means if you didn't have that in this environment, you and I would not be talking. That's the type of scale we're talking about. You're completely divorced from the benefits and advantages of computer technology in all ways. And so the fact is we need that instrument. And there is a fundraising campaign on the site. You will find that on the link given to Jason, as well as under the donation page. We're going to need about 14K. And again, it is the most introductory basic instrument that you will find in the lab. A single piece of equipment can cost you $250,000 without any problem. But that particular piece of equipment, called an infrared spectrometer, is a very valuable and useful piece of equipment. And we've got about 5,000 that has been raised thus far. And my goal is to have that 14K available within 2.5 months. So that when I start a project there, then we're ready to go. Truth is, the work is not going to be able to proceed without it at this point. I've done about as much as I can do with the types of materials I have available.
So that's at carnicominstitute.org. And I was just sitting here thinking, gee whiz, if 900, am I right? If 90 people gave $100, would that be 9,000?
90 with 2 zeros.
90 people gave $100.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean,
Sure.
it's not. It's just not that great of a challenge. Even though I know people are strapped, and I know people are supporting all kinds of causes. This is the stopgap. We are at it. Clifford has. I've watched. I am a witness to what you've done with so little. It's just nothing short of. It's like a magician or something you've been able to do. So yes, I do hope people come forward and go to the site and put some money in. That would be great.
Well, we'll see what we can't do. Oh, sorry, I thought I was muted there. Sorry, you heard me typing away, folks.
Yeah, very.
That's your drum roll.
Yeah, no, that's my bad. All right, well,
I want to just mention Lyme's. Don't forget that.
Yes, let's go into Lyme's disease, please. I'm going to give you the floor.
Yeah, I know several people here in the town I live in who have Lyme's, and they know nothing about Morgellons or chemtrails or anything. Clifford, explain how there is some sort of association between Lyme's and Morgellons.
Well, at this point, based on the literature I'm aware of, or any information I have, the word association is what is appropriate. And at this point, I would go no further on my side than say association is what's appropriate to use. There is a body of research literature that makes the case that for those individuals that claim to be afflicted with this condition, again known as Morgellons, that for that sample group, that if they're tested, that the bacterial forms of spirochete, from my knowledge, that is the cause, the spirochete that is the cause of Lyme disease, that it is found, let's say, on or within the body, okay, of those people that have this condition. So there are those individuals that are, I would say, pushing that sort of argument, I would say, further than warranted at this point. But if we watch our language carefully and we use the word association, I'm perfectly comfortable with that, because I think that is accurate. It's interesting. There is a paper being announced on this very issue. This was just written, February 17th, a month ago, basically saying an important paper is in the process of being announced. And it's very interesting as I look at the language used here, because in the subtitle of this paper, they'll use this word. They'll say, expert designate major pathogen Borrelia burgdorferi at root. What's interesting to me is the use of the word at root. It says designate major pathogen, then the bacteria is mentioned, and it says at root of unexplained dermopathy. Now that's an interesting phrase, because I think there's obviously an inference that is made if you use the word root. Root is generally going to mean source and cause. I think that would be the common interpretation. However, if you actually read the paper, it's an article. This is not a paper. This is just an article announcing a paper. But then furthermore, they will use the word, then they say this, then they use this phrase. Data confirms that Morgellons is a true somatic illness. Somatic means within the body. Somatic illness associated with disseminated, and then they give the name of the species. Now, to me, the interpretation of the language is entirely different, and the latter part of that I would perfectly concur with, that there does appear to be an association. But if there is an implication that there is a source or root attached to that, I would seriously question that, and I would have to ask you to read the papers that I present. They would show no spirochete form whatsoever. In fact, coccus form is at the root of my work. And I have no evidence to indicate whatsoever, from my standpoint, that this could be designated as any kind of source or cause. But the Institute will be presenting an online survey. It's a major effort by the Institute regarding the Morgellons condition. And you will find in that survey, when it comes out, we will be seeking this information. Because the way to answer these questions, again, to get to the what, is to collect the information. I believe the information should be made public also. And you will find that is simply one aspect of the survey, hardly dominating. And I do not work by drawing conclusions ahead of time. And you will find an honest effort to find out the nature and extent from the participants, whether or not there is any type of quote association or distribution of this particular bacterial species, and whether or not that's going to correlate. But I think one of the things that is important here, regardless of what turns out to be the case on this particular claim or not, is that one of the signs of our times is that we have now a host of chronic conditions, chronic health conditions that share numerous characteristics. And that's really the bigger issue here, is to get to an understanding of what is it a single source? Is it a combined source? Is there something in common? But things such as chronic fatigue syndrome, Lyme disease, Morgellons. You get into even the neural issues of Parkinson's disease, this type of thing. We have a multiple sclerosis. We have a whole host of illnesses or conditions that have some very common characteristics. And that, to me, is the bigger picture in which health professionals will need to pursue.
Right.
Well, we talked earlier about the pharmaceutical industry. And, what we've determined here on the broadcast, that it's really not rocket science. They really, I think, the pharmaceutical company, let's face it, they make profits when people are sick, not when people are well. Excuse me. So, I wonder how the whole pharmaceutical industry ties into this whole evil program, I guess. Do you see that? Do you see them being? When it comes to doing research about these things they're spraying in the air and the things we've been talking about, do you frequently find big pharma, if you trace back the money, are they behind this a lot?
Clifford, I don't think you go into that, do you? Not to my
No,
knowledge.
not as much. You know that I'm not generally speculative or agenda in nature. I have to go by what I see. But certainly I can have my comments. But I think that you could go ahead because I would suspect you would address them as well or better
Well,
than I do.
I'm sure that I mean, money is definitely behind this program, and I talk about that in the book about how disaster capitalism, a term that I really like from Naomi Klein and her book The Shock Doctrine. Um, this is disaster capitalism, so it may seem counter to decent folk who can't imagine that you would set a weather event on a certain area to destroy everything so that Halliburton could make profits. But this is exactly what we have today. And certainly Big Pharma, PHARMA, and Big Pharma, FARMA, and the medical industry are all in cahoots with making profits, particularly weather derivatives, which are off the chart as far as making billions from destruction, and the destruction of property, the destruction of people's bodies, people's minds. This is definitely what is going on as a sidebar, and I think that the decision makers behind this technology do sit down with the big corporate, the globalists, and they all cut the pie for yes, for money, for power, but also for a futuristic tendency that has the terms transhumanism and singularity attached to it, of a different idea of humanity, a different idea of life on planet Earth. And we always have to consider the globalists now. This is the year, by the way. I'll be going to Toronto, but I should announce, next month to give a talk on the 18th of April in Toronto. For people who are interested in that, they can contact Bye Bye Blue Sky, which is a wonderful Facebook site. And this is the year to give the big push to this issue, because in December there will be a huge UN climate change conference in Paris, which will be the decision maker as far as carbon taxes and pushing the agenda that will give the globalists the greatest amount of profit from nations. They'll have the weather instrument ready to blackmail and push nations into behaving and paying up their carbon taxes. And this is all part of I call it the Trojan horse, rolling the Trojan horse of global governance, actual direct global governance, not indirect anymore, through this climate issue. So that said, all big corporate interests are very engaged in this entire production that we are looking at.
Well, it sure seems like there's a lot of money behind it. And let's talk about what. Obviously, there's got to be, for them to be spraying this much stuff and having such a large program worldwide, there's got to be a lot of infrastructure that's just, I don't know if it's hiding in plain sight or we're just not aware of what we're looking at. What kind of infrastructure is necessary to be doing a project of this magnitude?
Well, that's what the book I'm just starting, the sequel to Chemtrails HAARP and the Full Spectrum Dominance. This book will be about the space fence, and it will be about how the infrastructure is all set up. If you had read the Chemtrails HAARP book, you would understand certainly the weather derivatives section. But this will go much further. We'll look at the cell towers, the Gwen towers, the NexRads, the SBXs offshore, all the ionospheric heaters in the world, This is important to understand how it is constructed here terrestrially, and also look at the space fence as it encircles the planet. And are we talking about a planetary lockdown? I believe we are. And so I have begun that book, and it'll take several months to write. But mostly I just want to document it. This will take me to the very edge of my technical skill to understand such a vast interplay of technologies. Thanks to Billy Hayes, Harold Save, and Jim Lee. They're my technical committee that I run things by in order to understand exactly what we are facing as far as infrastructure beyond the biological. But remember, you live in a Wi-Fi world. You live in a wireless world with an ionized atmosphere being continually ionized and continually made into a battery-ready wireless envelope. Then you are going to have an infrastructure that is constantly active. Is this changing our biology? Absolutely. And I have had conversations with Clifford because of having read and talked to some Morgellon sufferers who claim that when they go near the toaster oven, the fibers in their lesions go nuts. And is a wireless environment appetizing to the cross-domain bacteria? I believe it is.
All right. Well, we have about 10 minutes left, and I wanted to open up to any other topics you guys may want to discuss during those 10 minutes. I'm obviously new to this and just kind of getting my feet wet. I've been looking into it for maybe a year or two now, and so what are you guys really looking at right now? What's on your radar? What are the largest blips on your radar? Maybe even going into the Space Fence project. I know, Billy, you've talked about that a little bit before. But what I wanted to open up the floor and let you guys talk about what you guys want to talk about for the last 10 minutes.
Well, Billy, are you going to talk about the Space Fence? Because I did want to talk, as long as Clifford's here, for just a few minutes at some point about cyclotron resonance.
Go for it.
Well, Clifford, remember when we were deconstructing Eastland's patent on the phone a couple of years ago?
I do.
And we talked about Robert Becker's claims regarding his experiments regarding the cyclotron resonance in the body.
Yes.
One thing Billy says, which is, I think, exceedingly important, because people are constantly using the word HARP all the time now, but the HARP instrument itself has been, I won't say shut down, but for the purposes it was being used for before, it is no longer being used. Billy, could you talk a little bit about that and why that is, and especially about the pulsing that's going on, because that has directly to do with the cyclotron resonance.
And maybe for our listeners that are brand new to things, maybe explain what a cyclotron resonance is.
Okay, Billy, go ahead. You start.
Well, I'm almost unable to speak at the moment.
Are you okay? You don't have to.
Go ahead.
Clifford, why don't you talk about the cyclotron resonance?
Well, cyclotronic resonance is, in my studies, we're basically dealing, this is a physical phenomenon. This is something that is known and it's understood, and there's a relationship. And the relationship, you're calling me on top of my head here from memory, but you're dealing with a relationship that is going to involve the magnetic field of the Earth, okay? It's going to involve a charged particle, okay? And it's going to involve a frequency or wavelength. And the visual that would go along with this, that I have in my mind, which is, Beck introduced to me, is that if you imagine a magnetic field line, I don't have any problem in my mind imagining fields, but sometimes that's a stretch for some people. But a three-dimensional force field essentially is the magnetic field around this Earth. So it covers all three-dimensional space, emanates from the magnetic poles and envelops it. You have this magnetic line, and then in a magnetic field, which the Earth is, electrons will basically rotate around that magnetic field line in a helix, in a helical form. And there is a frequency, and it's the frequency of this issue which ends up being a very important issue, because, as Beck would talk about, the salts in our bodies, calcium, magnesium, potassium, if you look at the mathematics that describes this physical situation, you will find, because that particle I'm talking about is charged, so it satisfies what it is I'm talking about. You have a charged particle, an ion. There is a associated frequency with each of these salts in our bodies that is also a function of the magnetic field. So interestingly enough, it actually would vary depending on where you are on the Earth. But for all intents and purposes, we could say it falls within a range. And I got involved with work on this. I studied the electromagnetics quite a bit on this issue. And
especially on potassium, wasn't it?
Yes, that's certainly one that came out strong in question, and every one of the ions would be examined. But this is, at least I think, the fundamental question is we're talking about a relationship that involves a magnetic field, charged particles, and a resonance, and that these relationships are understood, and the circumstances and conditions that allow for determination of these, for the existence and the determination of these resonances is accessible to us. And it's a very important field of study, because there are direct health impacts that occur from from this resonance, from this vibration, basically. And you're talking about cellular damage. If something is energized at a level beyond which the biology was meant to handle, then it will start to disrupt the cellular membranes, and this is what Beck teaches us about. So it's a very important, and it's a physical phenomenon that has implications beyond just the physics.
And the reason that I brought it up, just so Jason and Jim, is that cyclotron resonance is the primary way that HAARP was operating. And now, and especially in the ELF range, the extra low frequency, actually, Clifford, I quote him in the book, it says, it can also be expected that variations in the magnetic field of the Earth, which, again, ionospheric heater technology coupled with chemtrails, especially the conductive heavy metals, absolutely affects the magnetic field lines of the Earth, can lead to other potential resonance conditions in various regions or latitudes. It is therefore not unexpected to find large regional health issues that will correlate with variations in the magnetic field strength of the Earth. Certain ions are expected to be disrupted in some areas of the globe more than others. And this appears to me, because HAARP was so over the top in its power, they now have switched to smaller units, such as the SBXs off the coast, which are generally being used along with NEXRADs on land to create weather systems, certainly on the West Coast, and then move it east along in order to do, like the two blizzards back east and that. This disruption of ions is exceedingly important when you're dealing with an ELF technology, which is what we're dealing with now, and it has smaller units now around the globe on certain latitudes and longitudes. So I hope to clarify that. Billy and I are, scratching our heads over how to get such a big system into words, but I hope to do that so that I can explain that.
And I need to mention this while we're on cyclotronic resonators. Come next few days, they're going to fire off the largest man-made cyclotronic resonator in the world, the CERN site. With this, in that split second of collision, every magnetometer on this Earth will be monitored. And they're gaining so much information out of this that out of something we have no idea. They have no idea what the repercussions of this CERN is capable of. Whereas, once again, the scientists are stepping into that nowhere land, just like they did when they shot off the atom bomb. Nobody had any idea what was going to happen, for sure. But everybody kept their pants on for that one. We don't know about this. They fired it up one time. They're firing it up the second time at a higher volume rate, and we have no idea what's getting ready to happen cyclotronically.
Yeah, good point.
Well, so, I mean, I guess we can't even speculate as to what could happen. What do you mean by every magnetron out there is going to be recorded? What do you mean by that?
Almost every college has a monitoring system set up to measure the magnetosphere flux influence when this goes off. And the information gained out of this is just unfathomable. This thing, when it goes off, it overpowers the Earth's magnetic field. It is so powerful. It's so big. It's so tremendous. It's so far out. We may be playing with a toy that's bigger than any atomic detonation we have ever seen.
Wow. When is that going off?
I think on the 22nd.
Okay, coming up. Well, we'll
So,
have to keep our eyes
to me, a fundamental sort of philosophical question that comes up when we have situations like this is by what authority do we have a situation where decisions can be made that essentially potentially affect, at least potentially, if not actually, affect the welfare of the planetary system and the inhabitants of it. By what authority is it granted that these decisions are to be made and the actions taken without the participation of the global community? I mean, I think at some point we're going to have to realize that we're not victims of things that happen. We have a responsibility to contend against that type of decision without our submission, consent, or authorization, that we are a part of that decision and we need to be involved in it.
So
Or at least informed.
Absolutely.
That's what the biggest problem is. Not only are we being not informed, but what information out there that they give us many times is misinformation.
All right, guys. Well, I want to thank you all for coming on the show and giving out this great information. We have just a couple minutes left. I want to give you all a chance to give out your websites once again and let people know where they can get more information about you.
Okay, yes, Facebook. People can come and see what they can learn about the chemtrails HARP technology and the military agendas attached to it. And the book is at Amazon.
All right, and we'll go ahead and post the other websites on our website and with the video when that.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.